Let's start here. So when we talk about communication, what is, first off, communication? It's not on the board, so don't look for the answer there because I'm just asking random things. So what is communication? Not this. Say it louder. Say it louder.
Getting information out.
Getting information out.
Exchange of ideas and information.
An exchange of ideas and information.
Receiving and sending the right message.
Receiving and sending the right message.
Transparency.
Transparency. Communication, we do it in all ways, every moment of every day. Communication is not just verbal exchange of ideas. It can be written. It can be visual, right? It can be the condition of our facilities. It can be our signage. It can be the look on our face, right? How many in your staffing evaluations get, man, you do an excellent job and everything's going great, but you need to smile more. 2 years in a row I got that. I got to smile. Those people are afraid to talk to you. They should be. They should be afraid to talk to me because they are horrible at what they do. So the nice thing about working for Smart Church Solutions is now I get paid to say everything I wanted to say for the 12 and a half years I was at this church. Okay? So people pay me to say what I think. So when we talk about communication, we're doing it every moment of every day. Our facilities are doing it every moment of every day. We say we're a church that loves our community, but then we have signs that say, don't get in our parking lot unless you're here for a church event. Don't open our doors. No, you can't use the restroom. And by the way, you need to look better before you come through our doors, right? We have signage up that says that in some shape, form, or fashion. Are we open to the community? Do we love our community in that regard? No. We say, hey, we love young families. And then you walk into the preschool department and it looks like a dungeon. And you're like, what do you love these young families for? I mean, the slave labor, what? What's going on here? You've got to ask these questions. The communication, and what we find when we start looking into communication, and this is one of my passion areas as well, is communication, because I did this with my staff over a period of 2 years. Took a dysfunctional leader, and staff, and turned it into a very high-functioning machine through understanding communication. And the biggest thing, the easiest takeaway to learn is all of you are unique, and all of you send and receive information in a way that's personal to you. And so what's the third part of that? Then that corollary that we can assume from that logic. If A is true and B is true, what is C? None of you communicate the same way. So there's going to be problems. Okay? We're different. That creates an internal friction whenever we communicate. And so when we talk about how do we communicate our needs to the church at large, to the deacon body, to the governing body, to the whatever, understand that how I prefer to receive information. Can anybody take a guess how I prefer to receive information? Don't tell me how you feel about it because I can't argue with that. And so if you say, I feel this way, hey, great, good on you. I'm not doing a thing with that. But if you say, based on observed conditions, this material has failed and it needs to be replaced, I can deal with that. And then I can go on the hunt to say, what are we willing to accept? What's the price point per square foot? And let me find what I need to find. Make sense? That's how I prefer. You're not going to hurt my feelings if you give me just facts. Okay? In fact, that's what I prefer. Now, some of you may not like that. Some of you may think if you had a meeting with me that Nathan's being mean and not friendly enough and not smiling enough. Yes, those were all complaints I got when I was in meetings. It's like, it's not that I don't like you, it's just that we're talking about something that is objective, but you keep throwing these subjective words into it, right? And we attach this emotion to it, and it makes it harder for me to do my job. Make sense? Now, does everybody prefer that way to communicate, to receive information, or to give it that way? Probably not. When Pat mentioned we did our little that thing. Strength finders, thank you. So it made an impact with me. No. So strength finders. So all my top 5 are all green. They're all analytical. Actually, 9 of my 10 are all green. So that puts me in a kind of a unique category. I really don't like emotions. But I had to learn with my staff that I can tell one member of my staff, Charles, go clean the balcony, it's dirty. Charles would go clean the balcony. Why? Because it was dirty. He wasn't offended. Nathan had a task. He gave it to me. I'm going to do the task. I'll come back when I'm done. Now, if I said that same thing to Kathy that same way, Kathy would like, why doesn't Nathan like me? Why is my work not good enough? Didn't we clean it last week? What's going on? So I had to say, hey, Kathy, you know, our standard for the balcony, since we had service a couple days ago and we had some people in there, it's definitely not hitting standards. So could you go take a look at that and bring it up to our standards? Kathy would be like, great. Nathan got a job for me. I'm going to do the job and I'll come back. It was exhausting sometimes for me to talk to Kathy. But it was more exhausting for me to talk to Kathy incorrectly and then have to do it 2 or 3 more times. Okay? So there is a cost, there is a cost, and so there's a point to this. It's not just me rambling up here on soapboxes, although I am doing it, I've got the mic. Sorry about your bad luck. When we talk about staffing multiplication, we talk about how do we incorporate all of this stuff here. We need to know this is a sampling of all the different people in all the different departments that you need to learn how they prefer to communicate by. That's not just 6 people, right? Think about it. How many is on your admin staff? How many service providers do you work with? How many IT people? These are all people that should theoretically have the same goal, right? Same mission, but they all communicate differently. All right, see, that's one of the funny things. Nobody's laughing, so now they're just going downhill from there. Sorry, guys. That's on you. Just remember this. That was on you. All right, so how much are we short-staffed? We've danced around it. We've talked around it. Okay, 6.5 years performing facility condition assessments, soon to be 7. One church has come close to those recommended staffing levels, by the way. 1. Over 7 million. That's me personally. That doesn't include what Tim's already done. That doesn't include what Pat's already done. It'll be over, for me personally, over 8 million square feet this year assessed. One church has come close. So on average, we're generally understaffed by 1.3 and 1.2 FTE for maintenance and custodial. By the way, those numbers do not account for depth, which I told you I started asking that new question with this new benchmarking report because I had that blinding, as my former boss told me, I had a BFO. Blinding flash of the obvious. That we look at the staffing level and then we think, wait a minute, because it happens a lot. If you're a facilities person, how many facilities people have lost vacation over the years because they haven't taken it? I was only allowed to carry 2 weeks over, 80 hours over vacation. I lost more vacation than I ever took in 12 and a half years. Okay? That's an unfortunate reality of a lot of our facility folks and facility teams. All right. Which is ironic because we don't pay them the most, but they're the one person that we say can't leave. The senior pastor can go on sabbatical for 3 months and we're like, rock on. But if the facility director goes incommunicado for 2 days, the church falls apart. Let that one sink in. Who's more important? All right, take that little nugget back. All right. So on average, 5,200 average hours of short staffing. So when you're short-staffed, when you don't have resources, when you don't have people, how good do you feel? Does it make you feel chipper? Excited to be here? Right? Probably doesn't. All right, what does it lead to? It leads to poor communication. Okay? And you know, poor communication is not just unfortunate. And again, I can send you this, so you don't need to, I will send it to you. I won't give you my standard line. If you want to know what's on there, just write down everything that's on there. Let's see, nobody laughed. I had one titter. Let's count that. So, this is an older one. Some of the takeaways of this report, State of Business Communication. We're losing an average of 7.47 hours of work a week due to poor communication. What could you do with 7.5 hours in your week? Half of our work week is communicating with people, and most of us, about 87% of the people responded, and it's been our experience as we go that number's probably higher, that they have some sort of communication issue during that week, right? We're always talking, but nobody's making sense, okay? Or at least nobody's hearing, okay? They want tools, make it easier. We're coming in better tools to help people communicate effectively. Unfortunately, the best tool to help you figure out how to communicate effectively is located in between your ears. It's the upper brain housing group, as we used to call it in the Marine Corps. And most people's upper brain housing group is dusty and needs to be cleaned when it comes to communication and hearing and whatnot. 9 and 10, poor communication negatively impacts your team's or company's productivity, morale, and growth. Now, some people might want to throw this away and say, Nathan, that wasn't done with church. Isn't church different? I would say yes, churches are generally worse. Okay? Because we put on this air, we think, well, everybody loves to work at a church. Wouldn't you love to have a job at a church? People who say that have never worked at a church. Because the church would be great to work for if it wasn't for the people. Okay? And that's me included. You know, I'd be awesome to work for as long as nobody else had to work for me. Okay? So, we have a lack of, and this isn't on the slides, but we have a lack of honesty and sincerity when we're evaluating ourselves as a church. As church people, as a team, as communicators, as facility workers, as such. I can't tell you how many times, because I don't remember, but I can tell you there's a lot of times we go on site, and it was my experience as well as an operations manager, that many facility folks do not feel heard. But yet they're in the know of everything. And it's very demoralizing to be the one that is expected to handle everything, but the only one that's allowed to be yelled at, or denigrated, or somehow made to feel less than. But then we can't take a vacation. Or if we do, our phone is constantly ringing because the room's hot, or a table's not there. Or a phone call I got on a Sunday morning. This was not obviously Walt Disney, but I got a phone call from someone on a Sunday morning because I worked myself in the rotation for Sunday mornings. Because there was trash in the front entrance area that somebody wanted me to go pick up. So I found the trash, and then I knew which phone they called me from. And to get that trash, throw it away, and then go back to that phone, I had to pass 3 trash cans. So they literally left the trash, it was just paper, on the ground, passed 3 trash to call me to go pick it up. What did that communicate about the value of my time and what I'm doing versus theirs? Right? We're always communicating, whether we realize what the message is or not. It's kind of on us to figure out what it is a lot of times. Is there an actual cost? Well, I probably wouldn't ask that question if I didn't have some numbers, right? Okay, I'm not that creative. But yes, there is an actual cost. $47 a day per calendar day. That's per employee, by the way. How many staff y'all got? 5? 10? 2? Okay, $8 a day. Almost $100 a day. $1,000 a month, $12,000 a year. If you got 50 employees, $625K. Most of us don't have 50 employees, but many of us have more than 50 members. There is a cost to miscommunication with members as well. It takes somebody's time. Time is money, right? So I'm going to hit on a little something. You asked about roofing stuff, and we've asked some questions about that. One of the things that we're working on as in our quest, our side quest, sounds like Zelda since it was just released. We have a side quest to get 1 for 75,000 FTE. Okay, sorry, that was me rambling. Part of it is how do we extend the maintenance interval? That extends the how long something lasts, right? Or are we installing the right thing when we have to replace something? I love traditional slate. It's beautiful. Traditional slate is expensive, and hardly anybody works on it. By its very nature, it makes it a very expensive thing. Well, it lasts a long time. Yes, but you can never fix it without spending an arm and a leg. When you can install synthetic slate that from the roof looks the same, but anybody can work on it. Or you can put a steel shingle or. See what I'm saying? We can extend the maintenance rule. That's part of communication, by the way. We need to ask people, is it really important to have that? Do we really need to spend $50,000 on new furniture when we could spend $10,000 on furniture that meets the needs for the hour and a half it's needed each week? Okay, why are we putting in the most comfortable chairs in some of our Sunday school rooms that are difficult to move, hard to keep clean, and everything, when literally it's used for an hour and a half a week? If you can't sit in a folding chair for an hour and a half, come on, man. Okay? So there's a cost. So all of this poor communication, what does that add up to? We're going to lose time. We're going to spend more money correcting communication, lose time handling maintenance, cleaning, preventative, and place undue stress on everybody. Does that make sense? Okay? So if you want a handy dandy number, 22. That's it. I'm just going to give you a number, 22. I'll tell you what to do with it. Now, if I did that, that would be poor communication on my part because you have no context for the number 22. $22 an hour. That's how much you can reasonably say, beyond any shadow of a doubt, that if you have a miscommunication, that's how much it's going to cost you per person per hour to resolve that miscommunication. So if I ask for a room to be set up, but I don't relay how I want it set up, and so now I got to ask the facility team to fix it. Okay, that's $22 out of my hour. That's $22 out of every facility person's day, right? That's having to fix that. Then that's the recriminations that come back. Why wasn't my room set up? That come up after the event. And my answer is, we set it up exactly how you told us the first time. Usually didn't go over well, but that's okay. But you see how this starts adding up, and then we bring other people into it. Well, let's have a meeting about that. Now I've just wasted $22 of all those other people's time. And now we're going to have a committee come in and deal with it. Now it's another $22 for a $5 fix. Okay, and that's this actual cost of communication. So when we look at how to communicate our needs, we look at staffing and how much hours do I need, we need to understand, we need to gather these facts, gather this data. We need to have it accessible. So then we can learn how to relay it appropriately to everyone else. So what is this data? And this isn't on the slide, so you'll have to write this down or at least listen to the recording. So your square footage. Do you know your square footage? You should. Do you know your annualized cost for utilities? We typically on our FCAs use electricity, gas, potable water, and trash. Okay, potable water, that's the stuff that's drinkable and in your restrooms. I don't really worry about what you use to water your grass. Because if you're low budget, that should be the first thing you should let die. Is all your landscaping. Sorry, it's just me. Do you know your annualized cost for that? And you have to be able to know how much you're spending per square foot. It was mentioned earlier. Because you can't track benchmarks. You can't create benchmarks if you don't know. When I teach sessions on facility condition assessments and what it entails, the biggest phrase that I use consistently throughout the entire day is, we cannot know how to get where we want to go if we don't know where we are. So knowing these facts and how to communicate them is necessary to be able to actually plan forward. So you don't wait till the air conditioner goes out to know what type of air conditioner you want to go back. Well, some people say, well, put the same one back. Well, I stepped out earlier because I had a phone call because a person was upset. They were integrating a system and they were but this one air handler does all 4 rooms. Does that mean anytime one of those rooms is requested, that air handler will be on? Yes. Well, it's cooling all 4 rooms and we're only using 1. Yes. Our software doesn't fix that. That's an engineering issue, you know. Someone didn't think of how they're actually going to need to use the building, or how they use the building changed, and nobody has, what's that C word that rhymes with communicated? Nobody communicated the new needs when they went to replace it. Because if they knew that those 4 rooms were not used all the time, then why didn't they have a discussion with the operations manager, facilities person, or their HVAC company and say, hey, when that goes out, we want the ability to only cool the space we're actually using. What would that cost? And at the time, if you're updating a unit, putting in a variable frequency drive motor, or adding some dampers in the existing ductwork, you're talking about an add of a couple thousand, probably less than 10,000 for a lot of these newer units. Most of them come with the ability to kind of do that, the newer stuff, versus trying to retrofit after the fact, where you're going to spend 3 to 4 times more. Okay? But again, are we communicating? Do you have a good enough communication schedule with your ministerial staff to understand how they're using your facility? Because how can you know what improvements to make if you don't know? How often is a room used? This is a critical piece of information. Where do you target your improvements? Probably in the most utilized space, especially if we're talking energy enhancement improvements. There's no sense making the least used part of the facility the most energy efficient, because nobody's going to be there, right? But we need to communicate that. We need to understand when we're creating budgets. We need to ask those hard questions. You know what? The roof's 5 years out. And I'm not picking on you for slate, everybody, but you said it, so I'm going to pick on you. It's slate. Slate's expensive per square foot to replace, or per square. Do we really need to go back with slate?
We shouldn't have to, but people in our church felt like we had to.
Yeah, and that's part of the communication process. Why? Why do you feel like you have to go back with slate? Well, because it's always been that way. And what value does that add to the spiritual or physical upkeep of the building? Put it in those terms. When we talk about communication, one of my favorite thing in facility condition assessments is when people push back. Ministerial staff push back. Well, we can't spend that money because that's going to impact our ministry. What I like to do is find the worst picture that I took in the building, which really isn't that hard usually, because there's a lot of them to choose from. I like to throw that up on the board and say, okay, this space has been entrusted to you. Does that picture accurately reflect how you feel about God? Because it's His. He told you to maintain it, and it looks like that. We communicate that way. We break down some of these barriers. Like I said, we're very, not incapable. It's hard to be honest in a church setting sometimes about the why. Well, it looks good. Last I checked in Scripture, and when I was in school, God's not concerned necessarily about the lipstick on the outside. It's the heart. It's what's on the inside, right? It's your true motivation. And I agree, slate is pretty, but I can't justify, in my mind, spending the money to put new slate when there's alternatives that last just as long or longer that then open up preventative maintenance and repair to multiple companies, which can drive down my repair and replacement costs. Everything has a cascade effect, and we have to be able to communicate that. Now me, if I'm talking to James or Tim or Pat, if I say, man, I can't justify the cost of that replacement slate for slate, they inherently know, because we've had these conversations, why I'm thinking that way. You all know now because I just communicated why I'm thinking that way. It's a very objective thought. Does it make sense to spend $1,500 extra a square for a material that nobody cares about unless it fails? I can't justify it objectively. Now, if you were to tell me, I feel that the church looks prettier with the slate roof. Great.
Yeah,
Right?
it's a custom blend color that you have custom made to go on your roof.
Yeah.
It stands out for the whole community.
Yeah, and how many people were drawn into the church going, you know what, I was driving by and I saw that custom color match slate roof, and I thought to myself, that is a place that I need to be. I ain't a betting man, but I'm pretty confident that I would take that one. Because I don't think any visitor guest card, any guest card says, the roof drew me in. No. So again, communication. What are we communicating? And to me, when we go on these assessments, when I see, hey, you got $800,000 worth of slate roof that's past replacement, and it's going to cost you, $850K to replace it. Or you could put this roof on for $400K. Now it just saved you $450,000. What could you use that $450,000 for? Maybe the other deferred maintenance that you have. Because you got $25 to $40 a square foot that's sitting out there, okay? When we talk about communication too, we talk about, that was awkward. Undue stress and time constraints on the facilities operations team. Again, this is a big one. We're already understaffed. When we have poor communication, we put more stress. We don't have a whole lot of happy facility teams, facility team members. What we do have, and this is kind of a generalization, what we do typically see in facility and operations teams are people who are very dedicated to the church and to their job. And because of that, they're being abused. They're being treated like indentured servants who should be thankful that they even have a job in this economy. And that's what we see. And this is not denomination specific. This is not region specific. This is general. We see this. And until we as a church body are willing to accept that's a bad thing to communicate to those people and to allow our members and guests to communicate to our people, it's going to be an issue. We talked a little bit about the funding and how do you compensate and are they compensated correctly? No. When I've got starting wages for McDonald's that are higher than most churches are paying their supervisory custodial leader, there's a disconnect. Again, we serve the very young and very old. But we pay, we're like the military, we want the cheapest person for it.
Nathan missed this last night. We went out to dinner, Tim and James and Chris and I, and we were talking about some of the things that we do as facilities managers to try to protect this. And I did an assessment where the facilities manager, she had this really awesome coaster on her desk. And I said, sure, your opinion matters, just not to me. And I thought, I like you. And I used to have a sign in my office that said, lack of planning on your part does not constitute an emergency online. And Chris said, but it does. My sign was there to try to encourage them to plan better. But the reality is, when they fail, it's on them. And that adds undue stress and time constraints and more devaluation of what we do as stewards.
And again, it comes back to that communication. How are we communicating our needs? Have we created an environment where those that we are serving are able to communicate effectively what they need? My rule was, if you use the systems that I had instituted in place to request what you needed in a timely manner, that me and my team would do everything in our power to accomplish exactly what you asked. If you gave us enough time, we could make some crazy things happen. Okay? And that was the tacit agreement that I made with the team. But it was not effective until we worked on our communication to understand the need and then give them tools and then have training with them. Tell me what you need in enough time for me to think through. Like I said, we're not the just say no people, but sometimes we are saying no because you come to us at the last minute with a helicopter landing on a sports field. And then us going, no, you probably shouldn't put a zip line in the worship center without hiring an appropriate rigging company. No, you shouldn't do certain things. Because part of the job of an effective facility manager, facility steward, is to recognize risk and try to mitigate it as much as possible. Which again, people hear no, and they think, you're telling me no. I'm saying no, I'm just saying let's pause and let's think through. I'm not going to say no to the event, but who are you going to call if the helicopter tips over and slices little Johnny in half? We don't want to think about little Johnny being sliced in half. Nobody wants to see little Johnny like that, except when he's being a little too. But that's the type of things we have to think through, but we have to be able to communicate that. I'm not wishing this event to go wrong. But if I'm prepared for the extraordinary, it's so much easier for me to handle the ordinary. Okay? And that's part of the communication. So, you've heard of the Strength Finders. We've talked about it. Has anybody done Strength Finders as a team? Has anybody done it with their facility team, custodial teams? Some of you. Has anybody shared that data then with the upper ministerial teams? Some of you. Does anybody keep the binder with how to communicate with all of your team easily accessible, so if anybody has a problem communicating with the team member, they can go to the binder to see how they best receive communication? That's a very specific question, right? That's what I did. That's what we found to do. It's not enough just to do it once. A one and done doesn't count. Once you learn about communication, what you learn is it's a process that is never ending. Because how we communicate when we're not under stress can be different than how we communicate when we're under stress. How we communicate when we have healthy work-life balance, which, raise your hand if you work in a church, and most of us don't have healthy work-life balance. Okay? So we tend to communicate differently. We communicate differently with our loved one versus our coworkers versus that member who just won't be quiet. Chris is good. The custodial person is good. Clean that restroom, so she would stop complaining. I would have just shut the restroom down. I'm kind of a jerk. We're like closed for complaints. No, we've had those people. We'll talk a little bit more about stuff like that during the cleaning one. I got stories. No. But understanding how you receive, and like I said, so can anybody imagine, because I've shared it like twice, what's a trigger for me when communicating with people? Feelings. That's right. Feelings. Don't care. Okay? Because I can't change it. That's your feelings. I am not going to deny how you feel about something. I can't do anything about that. But I can talk about it smells funny. Okay, well maybe the exhaust fan needs work. Or maybe someone used the restroom for what the restroom's used for.
Heaven forbid.
It's like the trash can smells funny. Well, trash isn't pretty, It is what it is. Sometimes, but we have to be able to communicate that, and we have to be willing to listen. So I wanted all the same chairs in my building, because if I have all the same style chairs, I don't have to stock a whole bunch of repair parts, and everything's good. That worked out well, except for what department? What Sunday school department had an issue with that? Senior adults. Why did they have an issue with that? Not because they're senior adults and they just had something to complain about. No, it was legit. I went and talked to the director, and she said, look, the chairs you have don't have arms, and the bases flare. So in our senior adult section, if they had assistive walking devices or trouble walking or couldn't see very well, that was a potential trip hazard. And if it didn't have arms, it was hard for the folks to get it up and down out of the chairs. Okay, so I had to put on my listening ears and go, that's legit. And it affects this department. I wasn't going to put up with that with like the young adult one. No, y'all can sit on beanbags, I don't care. I'm not getting armchairs. But for the senior adult department, we got armchairs with straight legs. Does it make sense? Okay, by having that conversation for 30 minutes saved me months of complaints if I had gone ahead and purchased all the chairs that they would have needed of the wrong style. I wish I could say I started that early on my career as an operations director in the church, but it was on my way out that I finally figured that out. But that's why I recognize it on all of the churches we visit. And the lack of communication, or poor communication. The church I was at last week, they know they've got issues. What they don't know is, in the executive summary of my report, is going to be the statement that one of their biggest issues is the poor and not completely truthful communication they have between departments. Because there's some hang-ups there that it doesn't matter if we gave them the best whiz-bang button, they push it and everything runs smoothly, they're going to argue about how to push the button. Okay? Because they're dysfunctional. But until they admit that, it doesn't matter the good suggestions that we have for how to save money and how to be a better steward. Because they can't steward the relationship. If you can't steward a relationship, you're not going to be able to steward a facility. And that's what comes down to communication. Okay, so any questions? I know I'm a little short. Well, not me, just the session. But what questions you got? Surely you got questions.
So I don't know if anybody's read a book by John Maloney. He's written a book on anxiety. He works for Dave Ramsey's organization. And in a recent podcast I was listening, he said, we speak with words, but we process and listen in images. And so when you're communicating with someone, to really make sure they're seeing the same picture that you're communicating, sometimes will require you to, okay, did I make myself clear? So you understand that what I want is the blue chairs, not the green chairs. I want it set up with a podium in the front and not a podium on the side. Make sure that the image you have in your mind of what you're communicating is actually what they're processing themselves as they're receiving your communication as well.
Or just have them repeat back to you what they thought you.
Yeah. Well, anytime you can get them to repeat back and then say, okay, so you heard me say that we're going to use blue chairs, not green, right? Okay.
And a trick my wife has taught me, she's taught me a lot of things, but the one about that, about the repeating back, is to actually change it to, now, what did you hear me say? Not just repeat back, because I can repeat back, but that may not be what I heard. Just like with my example with Kathy and Charles. I can say the same thing, they both heard differently. They can parrot back what I said exactly, but they heard it differently. Make sense? And it's being self-aware. Again, I know I have triggers. I have certain things that bug me. I have certain situations. We kind of laughed and joked. Facility manager office, myself, facility team's office was the boiler room. Literally the boiler room. One facility manager's desk at a FCA I did was housed immediately next to the boiler. Thinking, okay. That's a trigger for me. Because what does it communicate? It communicates that they're no better than where we put the junk. And my question to that pastoral staff and in those reports, I report, would your senior pastor feel comfortable bringing a new potential member to this office to talk with them about the church and how they care about people? Sometimes asking the hard questions is what you need to do to get people to think. They think, oh, the pastor would never do that. Okay, why? Because it's not good enough? Well, if it's not good enough for a potential new guest, why is it good enough for someone you expect to steward the facility? Those are the questions we need to ask when we talk about, again, communication. Because, again, communication is not just verbal. It's situational, it's relational, it's emotional, it's visual. It's all of that. If I say, yep, this is your area, you all get a locker and a chair. Oh, but we just hired a new administrative assistant, and I need you guys to go ahead and repaint this office, and they're gonna get a new desk and a new desk chair. I know we just replaced it 3 years ago, but they're new. We need to make them feel special. Everybody have those projects?
When did last time they feel special?
Yeah. So people looked at me like I had an arm growing on my forehead when I said, my team did not paint offices for new ministers or anybody. If they wanted a new color, I said, here's my account at Sherwin-Williams, go knock yourself out. I don't care what you did to your office. If you want to change it and make it different than what I had stock for everything else, that was on you. So this last little thing here, and I'll kind of read it because green and white in that distance it's pretty, it communicates. Nathan can't pick good colors. That's okay. So based off our benchmarking study that we did, a few things. So looking at, now we reference obviously eSpace for obvious reasons because that's our software, but using any technology, but especially scheduling, you should save your team more than 3 hours a week per person. Again, this is addressing this miscommunication. Do you have a system in place, a way in place that you can stop this miscommunication so you can clearly communicate what you need? If we're paying our staff $18 an hour, yeah, right? Sorry. $54, 52 weeks, that's $2,800 per person annually. If you're 3 people, by incorporating technology, and I know James is going to hit some more on that, on how do we add technology to maximize our workforce. And improved communication can save you $8,400 right off the bat. Could any of you use $8,400 somewhere else in your facility? Okay? If you add integration, could save another 3 hours. Could save with one person $5,600 annually in redeemed time. What could you do with $5,600 equivalent of hours, of free hours? Maybe address the deferred maintenance shortfall that we all have, right? Notice we've incorporated technology to save some of this communication. So if one full-time equivalent earning 18 is 37,000 annually, 15% more time to your single person. Just by incorporating some technology, we can have 1 FTE for every 40,000. So 35, so we've now gained efficiency of 5,000 square feet by incorporating technology to reduce poor communication and to be able to handle communication. Since most churches are significantly understaffed, everybody here staffed well in facility team. Yeah, we're like, oh, we need a new program. Let's hire a new pastor. Sorry, I'm getting a little soapbox here. But it's like, yeah, but the bathroom's still dirty. Okay. At a minimum, you could potentially reduce your shortfall by 468 hours, which is 3 people with improved communication. Because sometimes the improved communication is incorporating technology to take away the human factor for things that don't need to be handled by someone human. Changing thermostats, unlocking doors, stuff like that can be done with incorporating technology. I can adjust my thermostat, and I got warnings of my house thermostat because, you know, I leave town last week and both my mom's and my unit go out. Yay. But I got an alert. It's not cooling. It certainly isn't. Let me go ahead and turn that unit off so I quit drawing in that outside air. Let me call. Yep, got a leak in the inside air handler on the coil. Yay! So, but I was able to see that and handle that as I was flying out to Alabama. Okay? I didn't have to be there. I saved time, effort, and energy, and when we talked to the repair person, I didn't throttle them because they would start telling me, well, you know, the thermostat gives power to the outside unit. If you have an HVAC technician tell you that, walk away. Just walk away. Okay? The thermostat does not power the outside unit. Sorry. Some of you are laughing because you know why I'm struggling with that particular HVAC technician. But we were able to get it diagnosed partially before the even first service call came out there. So the first thing they did when the service technician came out was put his gauges on to check the freon level. Sure enough, it was low. Put it in the nitrogen, did a leak test, it leaked. We saved an hour of basic checks run through because I was able to communicate the problem effectively to the person in Alabama. I was in Alabama, they weren't. I don't know where they were, the first person. Make sense? All right, what questions you got? Questions, comments, complaints, concerns, issues? Yes, sir.
Just a good question on communication style. You made a comment early on in the presentation about when program staff wants a room ready. What we experience is they'll say they want a room ready. Let's say the event is at 5:30. We get it, we tell them to be ready at 4:30 because they are playing like 3. What is a good practice from your experience and how to communicate that? Because we tell them we're ready at 4:30, but about 3 o'clock they're in their freaking out because they're set up.
Yeah.
Is there a system that you use in the past?
Yeah. Yes, eSpace. You asked, so I'm going to tell you.
I'm like you. I'm very this is what's going to be done.
So that's why, like in our scheduling software in eSpace, for example, we have setup and teardown times built into the event time. And you can add schedules to it. I need to decorate, because that's what you're talking about. You're talking about they want decoration time. They want setup time. They don't want the room by 4:30. They want it to be completely ready for the event at 4:30, which means the reality is they've backstepped an hour, 90 minutes, whatever. That's how much time I need to decorate, put up my table stuff, and yada, 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 right? The communication is you need to put that on the event request. That I want decoration time, I want it to be able to decorate the room by this time. Tell us that. Otherwise, we will tell you the room will be ready by here. If you call us ahead of time, I'll be like, that's neat. You said the room needs to be ready by an hour beforehand, that's when you're getting it. And it's just being consistent, but it's sharing the expectation before it becomes the issue. And having that say, we want to serve you better. We recognize that you want the space earlier than you're actually requesting it. You're requesting it that way for whatever reason. But for us to better serve you and better staff our limited flexibility we have with our team, tell us when you absolutely need it for decorating. That way, I can shift my staff to set it up the night before if necessary. Because they may not need it till 3:30, but it might be easier because I got more people on Wednesday night. It might be easier to have my Wednesday night team set it up for the Thursday afternoon. And if you communicate that ahead of time to the ministerial staff or the other staff, give them the why. Over-exaggerate the why you need it. It helps to potentially get that information ahead of time while providing them a way to feel empowered with having better control over their event. Because if they feel that way, they typically are much more likely to give you the information ahead of time because then they feel heard.